right, welcome to our final session of the day. This one is called The Right Stuff, Nurturing the Mid-Career STEM Workforce. Thank you again to our day one sponsor, Dynetics, and thank you to Moog for also sponsoring this session. We appreciate it. So the aerospace community finds itself needing to be more and more strategic and proactive to the needs of its highly specialized mid-career research and engineering workforce. Anticipating their needs and wants and their full career paths is key to attract and retain this valuable group. So what kind of acquisition and retention strategies are being considered and implemented? What do these approaches cost in time and money? What is working and what isn't? This panel will discuss methods and approaches to this very mission critical subject. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator for this panel, Felipe Gomez del Campo, CEO of FGC Plasma Solutions. Felipe, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure moderating this distinguished panel. We live in really exciting times in aerospace. We just saw this week, the launch of manned commercial space flight. And we all know that aerospace systems are extremely complicated. So how we maintain and nurture our talent base is extremely important to our industry. So excited to talk about this today. Joining me on this virtual stage, and thank you for our audience for joining, are a few distinguished panelists. So I'm pleased to introduce Amelia Neal from Moog. She's a HR business partner there, as well as Dr. Debbie Augustine, the Deputy Director of Human Resources at NASA Glenn Research Center. Dr. Carlos Grudinsky, the Chief Operating Officer of Zinn Technologies. So welcome everyone to this panel. All right, it's good to see all of you virtually. So I'm glad to share the virtual stage with all of you to talk a little bit about how we, in our separate roles, I think we've got a good cross section of larger businesses, smaller businesses, public sector, private sector, all of us in aerospace. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about how we approach talent and how we approach nurturing mid-career talent at our respective organizations. It might not come across on video, but I'm not necessarily mid-career, so I am grateful for the experience of my fellow panelists here. So with that, I think we will turn it over to our first panelist, just going in the order of our on my screen here. So Amy, I wonder if you could share a little bit about your role at Moog and how you approach the mid-career workforce and talent development and retention.
Sure, yeah. So Moog is a precision motion control solutions provider. We've got 3 operating groups, and the group that I'm part of is Space and Defense Group. And so it's, Moog is it's a unique place, we think. It was founded by an engineer, Bill Moog, who had a very bright engineering background, but in addition to that, he had a really unique view of what a company should be. And how it should feel, to work at a company that he envisioned. And he said at one point, we would be a place with maximum confidence in those who worked for us. And those were Bill's words that he used in the 10th anniversary of the company as an address to his internal employees. And it was very important to him. It's very important to us today that we are still that company. And I think for us, it's our culture and our mutual trust and respect for one another that help us to be a great place for folks with a STEM background to be. We strive to hit on autonomy and mastery and purpose. It's not at a basic level. I guess that's what it is. Our culture and our the way that we live with mutual trust and mutual respect for one another helps to drive and enable that autonomy. Our project-based work is allowing for folks to really be making the decisions that are going to move this company forward. Those are our engineers, our technical leaders, our program leaders that are making those decisions, and our leadership is supporting them. As far as mastery is concerned, it's just investment in people, investing in the broad-based L&D resources, the platforms and the tools that are going to be able to launch those development opportunities. as basic as tuition reimbursement, help people and support them in their aspiration to further themselves in a technology, whether it's, education or certification or something else. Be there and be supportive of their interests and where they'd like to take their career. And in purpose, it's meaningful work. Our customers come to us when they need a solution to a challenging problem, and we take the time to understand that challenge and are making a very unique solution for that challenge, which for someone who's an engineer, having the ability to design a unique solution, that's meaningful work. That's very purposeful. That resonates with the STEM workforce. So those are the things that we focus on here at MOCA.
Apologies for mispronouncing your company's name there, but
that's okay. In the UK it is MOOC.
That explains it. I lived in the UK briefly, so we'll chalk it up to that. I really love what you were saying about sort of enabling autonomy for engineers, and as engineers, we love to work on tough problems. I think no one knows tough problems better than NASA. So with that, I'll turn it over to Debbie to give us her perspective on workforce development in the mid-career workforce within NASA Glenton.
Great, thank you, Felipe. So for us, of course, a little different than Amy's perspective, because we're a government entity, so NASA Glenn Research Center. This topic is very timely for us because I think the pandemic provided us an opportunity to kind of relook at and rethink how we attract and retain STEM talent. And so we've been actively exploring different ways to engage STEM talent and look at how we can position ourselves to be competitive, because there are great organizations in the private sector, of course, that we are competing with. And so we can't necessarily rely on brand recognition anymore. I think for a long time, NASA had a lot of brand recognition. And so we relied on that. It was kind of the cool place to work, the cool factor. But now we've got places like SpaceX and Virgin Galactic who are doing cool things just like we are. And so, having to compete in that arena has made us try to be a little more agile in terms of how we're approaching this particular topic. Some of the things that we've learned over the past year as we have started to relook at how we are approaching this topic is that, one, we know that retention efforts begin at the recruitment stage. So I think for a long time, we focused retention on just the folks who were there, but we really are trying to look at rethinking that position and knowing that, we do have some cool things to offer and that we can position ourselves to, at the recruitment stage, begin to sell some of what we have to offer for the long term for those who aspire to a lengthy career at NASA. So that's one thing that we've really tried to focus on. The second is just, we know that environment and culture play a large and important part in the retention of the STEM workforce. And so really taking a look at our current culture and what is it that's important to the mid-career engineers that we have there. And one of the things that we have found is that development is key. And so we happen to be really fortunate to have our current center director, Dr. Marla Perez Davis, who has a really strong focus on development. And so we are trying to position development in all aspects of the employee life cycle. So when they first onboard, what are some of the experiences that they need to avail themselves of? What can we offer to the mid-career engineer or STEM workforce for those who aspire to other opportunities, perhaps in leadership or other skill sets? And then, of course, how do we provide succession planning and those types of things for folks so that we have an engaging career for folks from the time they enter to the time that they leave? And then the third thing that we looked at is that we know that STEM employees, we found, want a variety of career experiences. So not just the job that they came to, but they want an opportunity to experience other things to broaden their skills, broaden their networks, and broaden their skill sets. So for those reasons, I think we're looking at some creative ways to implement programs and projects and things that people can avail themselves of. So one of the things that we are offering is, detail opportunities to other organizations. So Historically, detail opportunities have been looked at as, supplemental workforce for us. And instead, we're trying to reshape that and have people rethink of it as, how do we provide individuals with exposure to other things they may not have considered and make connections with folks they might not otherwise have had an opportunity to work with. Another thing that we have been heavily involved in over the past year is just looking at increasing the use of time-limited appointments to bring in some mid-career talent. So, rather than having somebody come in right at the beginning of their career and stay for the life cycle of their career, how do we bring in some, or give people opportunities who are in their mid-career an opportunity to come to NASA and to do some work for specific projects for a time-limited amount of time, so that they get that exposure and experience in the government sector that they can then take back to the private sector if that's where they came from, or potentially to compete for positions within NASA if that's what they aspire to. So there are lots of different things that we're trying to look at to help nurture the STEM career workforce. Like I said, starting right from the beginning when somebody enters on board, all the way throughout their careers. So I look forward to talking about that and engaging with you all more on that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all the things that NASA's working on. I always think that NASA does have the cool factor, but we are definitely in a different era of brand recognition with lots of big names in this space. Another important name in this space for sure is Zinn. Carlos, I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about your approach to workforce development and mid-career talent at Zinn.
Sure, absolutely, Felipe. Thank you. And to add, I want to give a little context about Zinn. We're what's considered a small business, although I'd say we're sort of mid-sized, about 300 folks, and we do have installations. Not just most of our people are right next to NASA Glenn Research Center, Debbie, and we've been supporting NASA Glenn for a number of decades. But I would say that we found, and we can look it up, the four things that really drive satisfaction in the STEM workforce, and certainly aerospace and defense, is really challenging work, tools for our engineers, and I want, in a little bit, I'll speak about skilled labor, our technicians that actually we rely on a lot to build a lot of our flight hardware, learning and technologies, and encourage innovation and mobility. So as a small business, I'll give a little bit more background. We do engineering work in the power and propulsion area, which is aligned to NASA Glenn Research Center. And we have a big space around science instrumentation, around biomedical things and physical sciences on orbit and space station, going all the way back to shuttle. So we are an OEM, although a small one, but we do build all our flight hardware, and then we test it. And relative to those things that really drive that satisfaction, we really partner with our teammates. In fact, we've worked with MOOC in the past, and certainly NASA directly. So the challenging work, I think, is just we have the luxury that all the work that we do is pretty challenging. So that's not too much of an issue. As far as getting the techniques and the tools and everything, we just have to be ahead of the curve on everything that we're doing with what our partners are. And strategy rise, because we're a small business, we tend and want to be very flexible to the needs of our employees. So I will say that in the mid-career area, it's not so much totally just around age anymore. In fact, some folks are coming to us possibly older, they've changed careers in between, or they're even younger, but they really want mobility challenges and new things to do. So as a small business also, a lot of the mid-career folks want to have sort of an entrepreneurial basis to what they're interested in. So we do things and do offer opportunities for even equity in some things we've done in the past, where as a small business, we have the commercial rights to some things we develop under contract, or like as an example, through small business innovative research. And we actually can start a division and have provided equity to certain folks, and that is of a lot of interest to our folks. On the skilled labor piece, it's all around certifications, training, and maintaining those proficiencies, and offering a lot of different work within the space business for the things that we do, just to keep people interested. I will say in the last 18 months, year, even though we did shut down, because a lot of the work that we did was considered essential, certainly a lot of the work we do for a space station, in Ohio, which was the majority of our operations, literally the state shut down I think the first week of March of last year, and we were back operating physically on the production floor by mid-March. So we really had to be flexible, and then we were moving to shift work. And so we had to be flexible of what our employees really needed to be able to do that and feel safe doing it. And I would say one other thing before we go to just discuss, the thing that we struggle with is this whole diversity, equity, and inclusion that we're in the aerospace and defense area. We're nowhere close to where we need to be, and we're always struggling to make sure that we are represented as well as we could be with the underrepresented folks. And a lot of that is in the recruitment. I think starting out from college, we do a lot of work with internships, and then people stay with us for a long time, I guess, like, and Moog, our retention rates are in the single digits, although we did see a spike a little bit we kind of have a bimodal distribution as far as older versus a gap, and then mid-career or younger folks. And there are folks that did decide to I guess, retire, although we're, again, back to flexibility, offered people if they wanted to work like part-time to still keep that knowledge base, and also teaming with our younger folks for mentor opportunities. So those are the things that we've been doing.
Thank you, Carlos. I'm glad you mentioned the diversity and inclusion part. I think in aerospace, we have a challenge that, maybe no other industry other than government has, in that we primarily have to hire only U.S. citizens, maybe some permanent residents, right? So that puts a much tighter funnel right into the pipeline that we can bring into our respective organizations. So naturally that, there are less people to choose from for a diverse workforce. So Debbie and Amy, would love to hear from both of you on how NASA approaches on how NASA and how Moog approach the idea of building a diverse workforce within aerospace. Obviously, I think we all have work to do, and there are natural restrictions on us, but we still, I think, all have a responsibility to make our workforces diverse and inclusive. And obviously, national origin is only a part of that. Would love to turn it over to both of you to hear your thoughts on diversity and inclusion in aerospace. Debbie, why don't you go first?
Sure. Thanks, Felipe, for the question. Definitely, I think it's something that we recognize as a challenge or issue. And in order to just focus a little bit on that, of course, it starts, as Carlos had said, in the recruitment phase. And so one of the things that I know we are looking at is expanding our definition of diversity. How do we define diversity? So, I think people traditionally think of race, ethnicity, national origin as their definition of diversity, but there are so many other ways that we can get diversity in a workplace. And as we know, that's one of the things that can help retain mid-career workforce. So, we look at everything from backgrounds, the schools that people went to, if they're different than people who are currently employed in our workforce. We're trying to look at, have people had experience in different industries instead of just government. So, I think looking at an expanded version of diversity is one way you can start to find talent in different places that can bring a different level of energy, insight, and introspection into the workforce. I think the other thing that we are trying to do specifically to target, minority individuals, because for us, of course, we've got a lot of regulation that we have to work within, but making sure that we are doing a lot of outreach in the places where we know that we can find some talent, and making sure that we have the relationships built with outside entities that can help identify some targeted talent for us. So minority serving institutions, we tend to show up a lot at their recruitment events or in career fairs and just speak about what NASA has to offer, what are some of the benefits of working at Glenn Research Center, what does our culture look like in terms of the workplace and the climate, what are our focal areas in terms of backgrounds and work. So trying to make it a little more attractive for folks to come to Cleveland and to Glenn Research Center, for sure, is one of the ways that we are looking at attracting diverse candidates. But I think also looking at some targeted outreach. So for us, we have a recruitment manager who's very adept at using all different kinds of platforms. So we use LinkedIn quite a lot to advertise, and we advertise on different places where there might be some affinity groups, or we use our employee resources groups a lot to help us identify places where we can do some outreach for diverse talent. So there are several ways we're doing that. A new thing also that we have been doing is bundling our announcements. So we do targeted announcements agency-wide, where we post a position for an engineer, for example, and then have folks apply. And it's just as many folks as we can get can apply to that particular advertisement. And then we leave that open for a period of time, a few, and then we get lots of applicants that we can then utilize as a large pool that we can pull from. Because as we know, the larger the pool, the greater the chance that you're going to have diverse candidates. So I think there are multiple ways that we're trying to attack this problem of looking at how do we influence diversity in the workforce within NASA Glenn.
Thank you. Lots of, I will take a page out of that book for our own work. So thank you, Debbie, for sharing that. Amy, do you have any thoughts to add to the subject as well?
Yeah, so it's a lot of what Carlos and Debbie have said. I think that at the start is really making sure that everybody at Moog is aware of the advantage that the company is able to achieve by having a diverse population. I mean, I think if you really want to look at a problem from many different ways to come up with the best solution that you can, you have to be able to leverage diverse thinking in order to see that problem from a whole different view. And so really it's identifying how can we influence diversity and increase the amount of diversity that we have at Moog through many different avenues. Recruitment being one of those, but in others, I think our DE&I Council is trying to help bring awareness to where DE&I fits in within other functions, and not necessarily just in the recruitment of new talent, but how do we influence diversity within multiple functions and across the company? I think as far as recruitment is concerned, Carlos and Debbie are hitting the nail right on the head. And you have to think differently about where you're going to acquire talent from. Where are you networking? You have to think differently. If you don't change the places you look for talent, you're not going to influence the success you'll have in increasing your diversity.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. I think along with diversity goes this whole idea of workplace culture, right? I think people definitely stay at in their jobs because they like the work that they're doing, right? I think that's something we can all bring in aerospace. It's very interesting problems to work on, like everyone has mentioned on the panel. Then the other reason that people stay at the work is that they like the culture, they like the people. Especially over the past year, we've had to change a little bit of what culture means, right? If there is no water cooler to bump into people at. Now, all of us, I think, are essential workers in one way or another, but I think we've all had different types of more remote or more hybrid work. So I would be interested in hearing from all of you, and I think the audience would as well, of how in sort of COVID, post-COVID area with remote, flexible, hybrid, whatever you want to call it, type of environment, how you've gone around about developing a culture that encourages retention and that that people like with all the the limitations that we have. I think I'm following a pattern here, so maybe you want to go ahead and Carlos.
I'll start. So it's a very good point about culture. Aerospace and defense have kind of this very historical, I want to say, older mindset. That, anyway, I probably have the most gray hair here, so I can say that. And really, I guess breaking down, I guess what we thought were the norms in relation to, how people get together, interact. There's always been this interactive remote work, just because we work with different teams across the country with our partners. We've done a lot of work in the past in relation to science, both technology, demonstration stuff on orbit and everything with principal investigators that typically come from international groups, international universities. So we were okay there. But to maintain that connection, I mean, personally, I'm not sure we did it well or anything, because I just remember all this, the buffering and all this stuff. The only thing I can say that we've continued is to be very, very flexible with all our employees, and to understand that every one of them have kind of, and because we're a small business, I have the luxury of that, so it's probably easier for us, but everyone has unique situations. And so relative to that, we were able to come on site, and so we tried to do that whenever we could, obviously following the CCD, the guidelines, CDC guidelines, and what were the guidelines in the state. I will say we actually operated and did a lot of testing even on the federal sites, like at Glenn, because of the essential work and operations. So following all those guidelines, I want to say that I didn't see a hit in how we interacted in the culture, other than to be a lot more flexible and understanding of people's situations. And I almost want to say that I didn't really see a hit in productivity. Everyone seems to be always working. I mean, this is I hate this thing right there. But when we worked virtually, it just seemed to continue, and it was difficult. And I think some people struggled with, trying to walk away from it when they were at home. And I guess the other thing that I want to say is I personally was always worried about the folks that they had to come in. They had to work in the production floor, and to make sure that we were all understanding that even though, there's quality assurance and engineers that had to test stuff, they had to come in too and be very flexible on timing and how to plan all that. So I just want to say is, the flexibility was key for us. And it was a constantly changing thing. I think it's not even settled down now, to be candid, really.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'd like to touch on afterward. I appreciate all those thoughts. Are how much of that flexibility is here to stay, right, and how much is going to pass once.
I would just like to add, if you don't embrace that, I believe those job satisfaction things, they're going to add a fifth one, flexibility, or some.
Yeah. So I that's how we look at it, right? I think now that we've passed the stress test of 15 months of flexible work, I think it's difficult to argue that you no longer have that flexibility. Amy, Debbie, wonder if you have similar thoughts there, and on sort of COVID flexibility in general.
Yeah, I would say definitely echo what Carlos had said in terms of flexibility being key. I think that we definitely have embraced this idea of work-life balance or flexibility, if you will, just being able to take advantage of the fact that, most of us were working from home for quite some time. And, now that restrictions are easing somewhat, trying to get our heads around how do we continue and maintain the flexibility that we gained through the pandemic. But the other thing that was important for us in terms of creating a culture was communication, because I think it's really difficult to do some communicating when you are remote and you are away from the norm. So there, like you said, Felipe, no longer the water cooler conversations. You have to almost build those in intentionally to be able to share things that might not otherwise be shared. From being off-site. But in terms of transparency, one of the things that we had done at our center is every week during the beginning of the pandemic and throughout, having town hall meetings that are led by center leadership to really just provide a status of what's happening at the center, where are we now, what is going on, and then opening it up to provide an opportunity for folks to ask questions, share concerns, and have them addressed directly live every week. And so that, to me, is a testament to wanting to create a culture where it's just open, transparent, nothing is left to question, and that, involving the individuals in the experience that they are having and making sure that the senior leadership is hearing how they're feeling and being able to provide some type of response or reaction to that to meet the needs of the individuals. So I'll just add that.
Yeah, I think that, so we at Moog was I'd say we were a come to work company before COVID. That's how I think you'd hear our CEO describe our approach to flexible work or remote work in the past. We were a come to work company. And I think that that's probably common for most engineering companies. It's a hands-on profession, and you need to, you collaborate with those around you and you work together. And so it was a big shock for us when we just seemingly overnight went to so much of our workforce working remote. We did have production folks that were still working on site, but for the large part, most folks went home virtually overnight. And so that was a big shock. I think that we learned an enormous amount about how important that flexibility is, how well we were able to do it. We learned skill sets that we didn't know we had, and things that we didn't have to pay too much attention to when we work in close proximity to one another now became something that is glaringly obvious. It's something that we have to try harder to do. So it was definitely a very, very interesting year. Moog, its culture and its values have always emphasized the individual needs of our employees. In most of what we do, we try and understand that every individual has unique circumstances. And this experience was no different. We had folks that were working well at home. We had folks with young children at home. This did not work well for them, that they remotely. We had physicians that worked well remotely, others that didn't. It took a lot of time to understand what the challenges were. And I think that was by and large the approach that we took. Is we tried as best we could to slow down and really understand the challenges that we were facing as they were coming up, and they were coming rapid fire throughout the year, but step back, slow down and understand the challenges, and then work to implement a solution that would work for all of our employees where we could. I think that moving forward, we certainly have realized that there are more opportunities for flexibility than we had in the past. And we are exploring those and do intend on having those a bigger part of how we work in the future. But it was hard. It was a hard year. And I think that as far as culture is concerned, we did see that with some folks needing to be in the building, some folks needing to work remotely, there was a perception that now we had to deal with throughout this year of different work styles for our employees, and they weren't deciding these work styles themselves. They had to be, if you're a production or, someone in a technician role, you didn't have a choice. You had to be away from your family in the building with the hardware. You didn't have that choice. If you were somebody who was at home and maybe you had ailing parents or you had young children, you had to work with your family in home. And that was very hard to disconnect from the day, between work and family. We had employees working all hours of the night. We had lunches being infringed on. We were just scrambling to pull as much time as we could. So slowing down and learning what our challenges were before we put solutions forward, listening to our employees, that was a big part of this year for us.
Yeah, I think that that summarizes the last year very well for all of us, right? And it's I think we're all lucky here, but it's been a tragic year for many people. We all, I think, learned to adapt. I'm curious which of those. So not everything was bad, right? I think some of the shift to more flexibility has really helped, right? So to Debbie's point, I think the ability to have a virtual town hall with center leadership might not have been as feasible if it was in person. You had to wheel out the center director or a center chief technologist once a week and book a big auditorium. It's much easier to do in a virtual setting, right? I think similarly, Amy, to your point of people who might have young kids to care for, and maybe it works for them to work at home, or sometimes it doesn't. Curious what your thoughts are of what is definitely here to stay, right, from this new flexible environment. Do we all in our industry is the 5 days in the office work week for most people going to return, or is that left in 2019? Maybe Carlos, do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I think because of the way we operate, we're returning and we've returned. We don't have a new policy where we can have remote work, but we do it on an individual by individual basis, depending on what the person does and if there's extraneous circumstances. We actually sort of always did that, but certainly we have more people that are interested in that. I would like to throw out one other topic, and maybe it's just unique to us, but in this flexibility in the remote work, we found some things where our benefits, specifically healthcare benefits, are kind of tied to, where you live, and some people felt that they, rightly so, if they had the support, the IT, be more remote or not necessarily where we thought they were. So that happened a couple of times, and it really woke me up to, obviously you can get work done, and you didn't really know. The only reason why we even found out is because people can get sick, or they go to an emergency room, and then all of a sudden insurers are a lot more interested. So I'd like to throw that out. Is that something that people worried about or saw? So anyway, back to your question, we're working from our locations, and then just are doing it individual by individual. And like I said, we saw some challenges around our benefits that we need to pay attention to.
Interesting point. Yeah, I would definitely love to hear the other panelists' thoughts on that. Amy, what about you at Move? What's here to stay in the new normal?
Yeah, so I think one of the big silver linings out of this has been a recognition that we can work with distributed teams, and that's been a real game changer, I think, because we have certain subject matter experts that reside in Moog in multiple different locations. So we have many different sites in the U.S. and globally, and because of the year that we spent working virtually with one another, it was a wonderful way to incorporate some of the offices that might have been smaller, might not have been involved in projects from another site in the past. Now with everybody working virtually, it kind of put everybody on the same, I don't know, on a level playing field, right? If the engineer you work with is typically next to you in East Aurora, here where our corporate office is, and the person sitting in Mountain View, California, they're all both virtual. Well, now you can communicate with both equally as well, or with equal challenges. So I think that it's really given us an understanding more we can do with distributed teams and how we can leverage our global workforce in a different way than we had been in the past, when we had relied on being in close proximity to one another. I think another thing that is definitely here to stay, and it might be a small thing, but are the concept of video calls. I think that there was some reluctance to turn some videos on the computers in the past. And I think with spending this year working remotely, we've all become a little bit more comfortable. And I find that my partnerships with folks, even sitting here on the same campus, we turn our videos on. The face-to-face communication, though it's not in the same room, I think is maybe better than it was before, because now I can communicate face-to-face with people that don't necessarily have to be right in front of me. So that, I think, is definitely here to stay.
I have to agree with you there. I think we very rarely use our conference call number anymore, but we use our Teams meeting invites all the time. So I think the video is definitely here to stay. Debbie, what are your thoughts here as well?
Yeah, I think that what we have experienced over the past year has definitely, both as Carlos and Amy said, made us more open to the possibilities of a hybrid work environment. So that offering that flexibility, I don't know that we will ever return fully to, having the expectation that everybody is on site every day for 2 weeks at a time. I think there will be some additional flexibilities where if you happen to be working on paper or analyzing data, those are things that can easily and effectively be done from a remote location. And so offering that option to folks is something that I think is definitely here to stay. Another thing that I think is here to stay is just being open to the possibilities of having more remote workers. And so that kind of expands our pool of who we are able to recruit and hire and attract. So I'll give myself as an example. I had started out on a detail opportunity to Glenn Research Center. I actually had started out working at headquarters at NASA and then had moved to Goddard Space Flight Center. And there was an opportunity to do a detail at Glenn. And so I took the opportunity, and then the pandemic hit. And so I started the detail remotely and, got hired permanently, and I'm still remote. And so that is, to me, it opens up the pool of who you are able to attract and retain by offering, that as a possibility, if that work can be done from another location. And then I think the third thing that we have experienced is just the ability to develop more folks at a time. So, with this idea of having virtual, all kinds of learning events, when we were on campus, we would have to limit the numbers of folks that we were able to accommodate just because of, training room occupancy limits, or because the vendor, only had materials for X number of folks. And over this past year, we've been able to offer things to hundreds of folks at a time, and even collaborate with other centers to offer different learning opportunities. And so I think that is going to be something that we look forward to continuing in the future, because it's just really, leveraging what's happening across all of NASA, as opposed to, doing things uniquely at each location. Kind of limits us in the past, and now I think we have an expanded repertoire that we're able to pull from, just because we're able to offer it on a virtual platform.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think we've all experienced in different ways, right? Whether it's center to center, or one office to another, how expanded use of these tools really help tie our different teams together. So I think I've talked to a good amount in this panel with questions. I have heard that we have a few audience questions as well, so I'll turn it over to Jim to pass along some questions from our audience here for the panel.
Sure, yeah. So Felipe, you haven't had the opportunity to talk much at all. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're the smallest company here, represented here, right? You're in the what? How many people are you in the teens?
Small but mighty. Yeah, we're 14.
There you go. So with respect to a mid-career workforce, what are some of the specific challenges to a small organization like yours, with respect to recruitment and retention of that mid-career workforce?
So it's a good question. I think it's one thing that all of us face in one way or another, right? So the principal challenge of, while we're small, right, we get to work on very exciting projects, right? We have, several federal partners that we work with, right? Some larger companies that we work with. So we have cool work that we can do, but we are more limited in terms of resources, right, and mentorship opportunities from larger companies, right? So when we first, I guess when we made the first hire of someone who was older than me, right, many years older than me, I really wondered what we could possibly bring to the table, right, for someone who could have worked anywhere else in the aerospace industry. And I think I've learned how important engaging and exciting work is for workforce development and recruitment, right? So we play to our strengths, right? We can't pay for someone's master's, we can't pay for all these training courses, but what we can do is offer very exciting work, right? Lots of ownership over projects, and for some people, they would rather go to a larger, more established company. But for some people, this is the fit that they like. So we sort of seek out the match between that and different candidates we might bring on.
Excellent. All right, good. Thanks. Just seeing if anybody else wanted to chime in there. But so a question did come in from the audience, and it somewhat related, but it's about management. So what are we doing to help managers of a mid-career workforce to assure that they're getting the development, the skills, and like you said, Felipe, it might be somebody older than you, whatever, and a workforce that's not only mid-career but hopefully more diverse. So what kind of skills and things are we all doing to assure that the management skills are there for the people already in place? So Debbie, why don't we start with you on that one?
Yeah, definitely, Jim. I think that what we have recognized is that, we say a lot, please go to your manager if you have a question, and we're not necessarily providing the manager with the tools and equipment that they need in order to make sure that they understand how to answer those questions. So over this past year, for sure, we have had an even greater emphasis on providing tools and support for supervisors in the way of agency-led supervisor series, so focusing on a different topic that has just-in-time tools and information to help the manager with various things, whether it's creating a culture that embraces diversity or how to manage a hybrid workforce, et cetera. And then the other thing that we are starting to do and have done and may continue to do is a supervisor community of practice, where we have an hour every month where we bring supervisors together. It's not mandatory. It's something that is open for any supervisor to attend. We usually have a focal topic, but then it's an opportunity for supervisors to ask any question that they have that they feel that they need some type of support with, or need an answer to, or need some tools. And so from that perspective, I think that has been one of our best practices, because supervisors can share with each other what they've been doing that has been successful. They can also share issues or challenges and get real-time feedback on, potentially how to address those. So I think there are many ways that we are looking at trying to make sure that we are equipping managers with exactly what they need, particularly in the arena of, developing and enhancing and strengthening that workplace culture, so that, the mid-career STEM employee wants to stay.
Sorry, I got to unmute myself. Amy, I see you nodding a lot there. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I think so. I think that one of the things that we're doing to try and help our managers is to help emphasize the need for knowledge transfer. So if you think about our mid-career STEM workforce, that's a lot of our subject matter experts. That's somebody who's been working for some time in either a specific technical field or function, and they have a lot of knowledge, experience, and know-how that we rely on. And so in order to enable their development and their growth, we have to emphasize the knowledge transfer so that we can allow them to move on from the role they might be in today and prepare them for the role that they'll have tomorrow. And that's a lot of work to put on our managers and supervisors to have to do that on their own for each individual employee. So we do try and at a broad level, look to our learning and development function to help equip us with the platforms and the tools that we need to be able to support our managers and supervisors in that knowledge transfer piece. I think another thing is emphasizing the need to have really meaningful one-on-one conversations. So using that engagement model and understanding the direction and the trajectory that the employee is looking for and that they want for themselves and their own career growth, and making sure that's aligned with what the company goals are, what's our business strategy, and what are the objectives that we think we need to realize as a business in order to get where we're going in the next 5 or 10 years. When those two things are aligned, that's when you drive a tremendous amount of engagement for that person who's in their, in the middle of their career, they're still looking for new challenges. Sometimes we don't do them any favors when they become a single point failure and then they just keep doing the same work all the time. And that's not motivating and that's not engaging. So trying to hit on ways to improve that and enhance the alignment between the employee's interests, where they'd like to go, and the company's interests is key.
Carlos, did you have anything else?
I guess the only thing I would add is that we have really worked very hard on communications and cross inter-organizational communications and expectations. And that really is around the functional managers to understand what problems they have, but to give them a voice and a support to understand what issues and problems they're having. And I guess to what Amy said, we've done it programmatically and project-wise forever, what's called lessons learned and capturing in databases in relation to risks and stuff like that. But with that communication and everything, we've opened it up to mentoring and cross-functional training and really capturing that. I think it was Amy who said tribal knowledge. I can't remember who mentioned it, but there is a lot of tribal knowledge that has to be captured to really, disseminate it through the folks, and especially in this new remote culture, that is harder. I think it will be harder. And there are some challenges in this remote. In our business, networking and relationships are really, really, really important. And historically, they've been done through face-to-face meetings and conferences and stuff. So I think there will be some challenges in the future for us that have kind of been in the industry for 20, 30, or more years, kind of have those. But we got to somehow maintain that in this new arena.
Absolutely. I think all these are challenges that we'll have to face together. I think we do have one more audience question, so I'll turn it back to Jim here.
Okay, if you want, yeah. So it goes to what Carlos was just talking about a little bit, but and what we were talking about, what Debbie was talking about before. I mean, space right now is hot. It is the place to be, right? You've got NASA's always been a good place to be, always, ranked really high up in the best places to work kind of thing. And then, yeah, you've got this just unbelievable momentum right now. How do we keep that going? Inevitably things are going to happen. Some money's going to dry up, something like that. Things are going to taper off a little bit. How will all of you anticipate trying to keep up that attractiveness for your potential workforce? Why don't we start with you, Amy?
Yeah, sure. So I think this is where we look to our advanced programs groups. We look to the team that's looking out, 5, 10, 15 years. uncovering what are the technologies and the market opportunities for us in the future, and trying to make sure that we're preparing ourselves to be able to participate in those opportunities. I think that it's I think every year you look back, and maybe hindsight's 2020, and you see these businesses that are flourishing today, and 5 years ago they were being incubated as an idea. So you really have to make sure that you maintain that robust pipeline. And we're seeing that with commercial space, right? So innovative space, that's what we call here at Moog is innovative space, these new opportunities that are out there for us to participate in. Systems level thinking about the component offerings and the subsystem offerings that we have today. How do we leverage those as a larger system in the future? We've got some new businesses that have taken off here at Moog in the last couple of years. One of them being our space vehicles business and an orbital maneuvering vehicle that's doing very, very well. And we also have some new opportunities in different markets that we're not participating in today. So really leveraging those advanced programs groups and tying the technology developments to the market opportunities that are out there.
Gotcha. Debbie, what about you from the NASA side of things?
Yeah, from the NASA side of things, I would say there are a couple of things that we're going to have to do in order to stay competitive and stay relevant. Of course, we can't necessarily compete when it comes to salary dollars, but we do have other things that are available that could potentially be attractive for folks who want to, for example, have the work-life flexibility. I think that's always been a big draw for NASA. You get to work on cool projects and you also get to take care of your family. And so I know that there are folks who come to NASA because of a mission that they're working on, and they get to see it from cradle to grave. And that to them is like a lifelong dream that they've always had. So just doing a better job of selling what we have to offer. I think doing a better job telling our story, doing a better job of selling our successes, and just reinvigorating that cool factor that some of the other commercial space entities have. So things like the Mars rover that landed, and just making sure that we stay engaged and at the forefront of just letting people know that hey, we are doing cool stuff too, and that how they can be engaged and a part of those things, I think is going to be definitely important for us. And then similar to what Amy had said, I think just looking at what is it that our commercial partners are able to offer in terms of flexibilities, and what are some of those things that we can potentially replicate within the public space to be able to make it more attractive for the folks who aspire to come to NASA. So I think we've got a lot of opportunities, and there are a lot of things that we're already doing really well. And I think there's always room for growth and improvement, and looking forward to doing some of that in the future.
Well,
Carlos?
yeah, Carlos.
Oh, real quick, I guess I'll just certainly echo what Debbie and Amy said. We are constantly reinventing ourselves, making sure we're relevant to the new missions. But I would say, because the market is just exploding to the commercial side, we're seeing that we have a lot more opportunity, and our biggest challenge is to make sure that we can sustain that growth in a way that nothing ever falls down, basically, and support it, which obviously is with strategic partnerships, and as well as I guess more of our historical being a prime to the government. But that being said, our flexibility in investing back in our people, as well as their ideas, we've gotten a lot of traction, and then offering them possibly some equity stake in some of the things that are of value to the market has helped us grow. And Felipe, I remember when we were your size, it's been a while, but that trajectory and that constant change that you have to have is not easy. So, but it's fun.
Yes.
And challenging, right? So.
Yeah, definitely lots of both. Well, I appreciate that. I think fun and challenging is a great way to sum up our industry. I think with that, I want to thank all of you panelists for joining us today, and Jim for organizing this. It was a pleasure to virtually share the stage with all of you, and hopefully be able to share it in person soon.
Yeah, hopefully we get back to the in-person meetings very soon indeed, for lots of reasons, including the business development and all the other reasons that we've talked about. So yes, thank you very much to all of you for doing this. We really appreciate it. That was a great talk. All right. All right. And
Thank you very much.
thanks so much. And
Thank
so
you.
with that, that concludes this first day of the Glenn Symposium for 2021. I'd like to thank our sponsors for that session, Dynetics and Moog. Let's see, thanks to all of our event sponsors, Aerojet Rocketdyne, the Aerospace Corporation, Ball Aerospace, Dynetics, Lockheed Martin, Maxar, Moog, and Teledyne Brown Engineering, and our media sponsor, Space News. And thanks to everyone at the NASA Glenn Research Center. We appreciate all the hard work you did. So we'll see you all tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern for another great day, starting with our keynote speaker, NASA Administrator Bill Nelson. Don't miss it. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thanks.